There are so many different metrics by which one may judge what good animation is. Fluidity, fidelity, level of detail, colorfulness, expressiveness, visual originality, dynamic movement, and so many more that I can't presently name or just don't personally know of. But here's what I know for sure. In at the very least one way of looking at it, City the Animation is the best looking anime ever put to television. I would expect nothing less from the absolute animation gods over at KyoAni. Yeah, for a ton of different reasons, this was easily my most highly anticipated anime of the year. Kyoto Animation is my favorite anime studio of all time, City's spiritual ancestor Nichijou is one of their best shows, and this anime also marks a very significant first for me. It's the first time I ever read the manga first. A situation which ended up being both the show's greatest strength and greatest weakness for me. So for some backstory, being the massive fan of the Nichijou anime that I am, I eventually caught wind of Keiichi Arawi's other most prominent manga series, City. I'd been considering it for a while as my proper initial dive into manga, because even now it's still a medium that I'm very new to. The only other Japanese manga I've read in full since are these three, and they are quite a bit shorter than City. But as soon as KyoAni announced in late 2024 that they were going to make an adaptation, I started buying about 2 volumes at once, and by the time the anime came out, I'd gotten through all 13. Another thing which made my experience with this show special is that it's the first time I've ever had a friend over every week to watch an anime as it was airing. A fellow massive fan of Nichijou. We definitely didn't hit every week perfectly, we're both pretty busy people, but it absolutely still enhanced the fun of watching this show. As for how City the Animation fares as an adaptation of the manga I've grown incredibly fond of, I forget where I saw it, but I saw someone else sum it up perfectly as an incomplete masterpiece. Every single chapter they adapt here is realized to utter perfection. So faithfully and beautifully made with unbelievable animation, top-notch voice acting, and an excellent score as well. But damn, they cut so much from the manga. Now this is perfectly understandable on KyoAni's part. Their adaptation of Nichijou was a much more thorough work and ultimately double the length of City. And while it's become a classic in the years since, it was a pretty big financial loss back when it first came out in 2011, so I can understand why they would want to take a different approach with this new adaptation. City is a manga built out of various individual bits with a relatively loose overarching story and tons of chapters that could theoretically be cut pretty inconsequentially. And thanks to the fact that Keiichi Arawi was actually in the writer's room with KyoAni as they were making these cuts, most of these cuts do feel decently natural. Most of my absolute favorite chapters were adapted, but to get all of my negatives with this wonderful series out of the way first, let's talk about all the cuts that actually bugged me. The rivalry between Nagamo and her landlord is pretty central to the characterization of both women in the manga, but they hardly get any scenes together in the anime, with the landlord getting barely any scenes to begin with. The Adatara family also gets hardly any scenes where they're given central focus, and Mio Naganohara, one of the main characters from Nichijou, frequently cameos in the City manga as well, but for the anime, they genuinely brought back her voice actor for literally one line in episode 3 and nothing else. They also cut down the Desert Island plotline, which takes up an entire volume of the manga, into an end credits scene so awkward that I kinda just wish they hadn't included it at all. And the most significant one for me, they cut the entire mayoral election, which serves as the manga's finale. So much amazing content was left on the cutting room floor that I would be delighted to see KyoAni adapt. But I must reiterate, all the chapters they did adapt in full were everything I could have asked for. Once I gave the series a third viewing in December, several months removed from my initial slight disappointment and knowing what to expect going in, most of these adaptational problems melted away from me, and I was simply able to have a great time with this excellent show. Their half-assed work on the Desert Island plot does still piss me off, but as for the plentiful things they got right, since the show's end, KyoAni have spoken about how they chose to make Matsuri and Eri's story, at least to some degree, the central focus of the anime, because their relationship has the most pronounced emotional arc in the manga, and this was a wise decision on their part. The beauty of these two is that, in a platonic way, they so perfectly match each other's freak. They're often shown to be somewhat weirdo outsiders, but never in a way that causes you to feel bad for them. The whole joke here is that they're teenage girls who play pretend like they're 8-year-old boys, and they are so eternally committed to the bit. purely for their own entertainment. Even when their bits aren't like the funniest, they are still so extremely endearing to watch. The bizarre behavior of these girls even ties into their emotional arcs when it comes time for Eri's family to leave for England. Eri tries to avoid having a difficult emotional goodbye by concealing it in yet another goofy bit, only for Matsuri to break down her walls at the last minute and force them to have a proper, tearful goodbye. Absolute cinema. The manga's central Mont Blanc trio are also done full justice here. There's Nagamo, the fun-loving, somewhat selfish slacker with a dormant sense of burning determination, her narrative punching bag of a roommate, Nikurur, who more or less has a crush on her, but only when she's showing off that determination, otherwise they low-key hate each other. And then of course Wako, the free-spirited wildcard who's a pretty easy autism headcanon, but in a very escapist sort of way because she's so utterly dumbfounding to all those around her that she actually lives her life almost entirely stress-free. Girl literally laughs in the face of danger on numerous occasions, and we love her goofy ass for it. But yeah, all three of these girls are given numerous funny scenes to themselves, as well as numerous opportunities to play off of each other and the massive ensemble cast in so many hilarious ways. I think my personal favorite chapter of the manga in terms of pure comedy would be Midnight Snacker, where Nikurur describes the shameful experience of eating raw ramen in the middle of the night with almost sexual language, and I am so happy they actually adapted that one. It was so fucking funny. And there are obviously other enjoyable characters as well. The men of the Makabe household and their individual struggles. Miss Tanabe, who is the most wholesome, out-of-touch rich person ever created for fiction. There's Todoroki and Kamaboko, who were never my personal favorites even in the manga, but they still get some really amusing bits here and there. And plenty of other very funny one-off bits as well. But now I want to talk about some of the show's biggest moments. In my mind, the manga has 4 main big event plot lines, 2 of which I mentioned before as not really being in the show, the mayoral election and the desert island, but they do include the 4th annual city race, giving it an entire episode to itself, and it was incredible. It has what is easily the second most mind-bending sequence of animation in the entire show, so many of the funniest gags in the entire series, and the eventual payoff of the most deserving characters in the show winning the day. Absolute cinema. But then we have the earliest of these big events, that being the big outdoor party at Miss Tanabe's mansion. It's pretty unanimously agreed upon that the most impressive achievement of the entire manga lands in Volume 4. The earlier parts of this volume spend time getting almost every single character in on this party and setting up individual jokes with them, and then it culminates in this 4-page spread with all the different characters crammed together in this one location and like 20 different jokes going on at once that can be followed between each page. It's numerous 4-panel jokes happening simultaneously. I must have spent nearly an hour flipping back and forth between those 4 pages when I first read them. I seriously would not have blamed KyoAni for entirely skipping this plotline because of how completely dependent it is on manga as a medium, but they don't give up that easily. Firstly, they spend the middle third of the episode going split screen with as many as 7 different segments happening right alongside each other, all of which are genuinely coherent through their visual storytelling alone, with only one of them at a time having any audio. And then when it comes time for the spread itself, I mean, I just gotta show ya. What they did here is try to adapt the unadaptable, and while I can't say it 100% works, I am still left in utter awe of this episode. It is the absolute best anyone could have possibly done trying to represent all the converging plotlines of episode 4 of Volume 4 on screen. Storytelling on a 4-page spread like this can't really work in animation the same way it can in manga. That's just one of the advantages of comic books as an art form. But I still respect the hell out of KyoAni for trying their damnedest and ultimately producing something so beautifully mind-bending and of extremely high quality, even if it's inherently impossible to 100% follow in this medium of animation. These guys just keep on finding insane new ways to raise the bar. I love Kyoto Animation so much, man. And I gotta say, even though the mayoral election is sorely missed, this random big swing of them making the finale a musical episode was honestly so damn fun, especially on that final rewatch where I knew what to expect going in. It was particularly delightful to hear Nikurur singing because her voice actress also sang for and voiced Yui in K-On!, so that was just a nice little bit of fan service for us K-On! Fans. But yeah, despite my numerous gripes with it as an adaptation, I can't act like City the Animation was anything other than an absolute delight. Obviously gut-busting KGRW comedy, a massive cast of endlessly charming characters, a really good primarily reggae score from Pyranians as well, and I am dead serious when I say it might be the best looking anime ever put to television. I cannot recommend it enough. That was originally going to be the end of the video, but I realized after the fact that there are a few more things I want to add. The question has naturally arisen around this show regarding how exactly it compares to its sister series Nichijou. And while I do think I am, at the end of the day, personally a slightly bigger fan of Nichijou, I don't think it's as simple a question as simply choosing one or the other. Ignoring the manga for a second, purely in terms of the animated medium, I do feel more attached to the characters of Nichijou, if for no other reason than we were given double the time to get to know them, but I do think City the Animation is a more unique experience. Let me put it like this. Nichijou feels like an excellent anime adaptation of Keiichi Arawi's style. Very, very Arawi, but also very anime in terms of things like its visual palette and simply the fact that Nichijou plays around with far more common anime tropes than City does. Now this may sound pretentious as hell, but in a lot of ways, City the Animation doesn't really feel like an anime to me. In terms of its tone, visuals, world, music, characters, it all just feels like the purest possible distillation of what Keiichi Arawi's work is. Nichijou is a very unique anime, but City kind of feels like its own thing entirely, and in that way I do think it exceeds Nichijou. But Yuko is still my goat, I gotta be honest. So to answer that question in the thumbnail, is City the Animation a good adaptation of the manga? You know, I think I'm just gonna leave it at what I said earlier. It's a great time, but it's an incomplete masterpiece. Here's what I will say. If you loved this show, you absolutely need to check out the manga. Because for you, it won't just be like experiencing the whole same story again, but this time on the page. You will discover so much more to love. As I have well established by this point, there is a ton of stuff that does not appear in the anime. Some of the best material of the franchise. I don't know the exact number or anything, but I'd venture to say that around half of the chapters were not adapted. If this show was your thing, you are going to love the manga as well, I promise you. And one final note before I let you go, I should also mention that this entire video, up until the section with the shorter hair, has actually just been a single segment of a much larger video I posted around a week ago. A video where I ranked and reviewed all 31 new seasons of animated television that I watched in 2025, where City ranked 4th. I realized during the editing process that my thoughts on City, by far the longest segment of the video, could also totally work as their own video, so here we are. But please, if you enjoyed or were compelled by what I had to say here and are also interested in shows like Dandadan, Invincible, Takabi's Original Sin, Common Side Effects, Medalist, or any of these 20 other plus shows I talk about, please consider giving it a watch. At least the parts relating to the shows you like. Thank you.